Hello everyone, good day. Welcome to my class as we begin to our new chapter in anatomy and physiology. Previously, you have gone through about the essentials of anatomy and physiology, including its basic concepts, the basic definitions of anatomy and physiology, and their subspecialties. Also, the six levels of structural organization, anatomical and directional terms, and lastly, the anatomy of the microscope, which are all incorporated in my modules. But for today, we will be talking about the introduction to cell physiology. Specifically, I will discuss to you the concepts of cells, its basic structures, their functions, their normal characteristics, the cell cycles, the DNA, the genes, and lastly, the sequence of events in protein synthesis. An important aspect to understand cell physiology is to first define what is cell. Cell is said to be the basic unit of life. It also implies that cell is the smallest part to which an organism can be reduced that still retain the characteristics of life. The simplest organisms consist of a single cell, whereas humans are composed of trillions of cells. As I said, it composed trillions of cells. So, napakadami palang cells na makikita lamang within our body. I think you are also familiar terms like eukaryotic organisms and prokaryotic organisms. Why I'm also talking about this type of organisms is that since cells is a basic unit of life, it can also mean that cell is the basic unit of all the living organisms or living things. Since there are prokaryotic organism and eukaryotic organism, we need to distinguish within these two types of organisms. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng prokaryotic? Pag sinabi nating prokaryotic, these organisms do not have a true nucleus. As I said, prokaryotic, walang true nucleus. But they consist a nucleoid. What is a nucleoid? It is different from the term nucleus or nucleus. Because a nucleoid is a nucleus-like structure that can be located among the prokaryotic organism. No? Kasi sinasabing it is not a true nucleus, although they have this type of structure within their cells. It is just a nucleus-like structure. Parang nucleus. Kaya hindi siya true nucleus. On the other hand, pag sinabi natin eukaryotic, again, eukaryotic, mga eukaryotes, they have a membrane-bound organelles. One of the common organelles, pag sinabi nitong organelles, these are also parts of those cells. Mamaya, i-lecture ko, ano yung mga common parts or structures within the cells. Since eukaryotes have a membrane-bound organelles, common organelles that cannot be located in the prokaryotic organism is the nucleus. Since eukaryotic organism has a membrane-bound organelles, example is the nucleus. The nucleus in the prokaryotic organism is surrounded by a nuclear membrane. That is their difference. So what are the examples of prokaryotic organism? Ano may example nun? Common examples are bacteria and archaea. While on the other hand, pag sinabi naman nating eukaryotic, ito yung mga plants, animals, fungi, protists. So, ano yung mga example ng mga protists? Kasi medyo malaki yung kanilang classification din. Mga protists, this also involves your protozoa. Pag sinabi natin yung protozoa, marami naman examples nun. Katulad ng mga amoeba. No? Other examples of your protists are algae. No? Yun yung mga common example ng mga protists. So again, prokaryotic, they are from the domains of bacteria and archaea. While on the other hand, eukaryotic are your plants, animals, fungi, and protists. There's question raised that is virus can be classified as a living organism? Well, when we say virus, since you have known this so far, since we are facing this pandemic malady, since COVID-19 is caused by a specific virus, a certain type of virus called as your SARS-CoV-2 virus. Since virus, according to most of the virologists, they consider virus as a non-cellular organism or also called as your acellular organism. Pag sinabi natin acellular, means absence, the prefix means absence. So absence of cells. They're non-cellular type of organism. Instead, this type of they are a microscopic particles, no, in a form of a DNA, can be an RNA particles. Since virologists classified virus as a non-living organism, why they classify this as non-living, by the way? It is because that virus do not meet all the criteria of a generally accepted definition of life. Another important definition of cell is that they are organized structures made up of chemicals arranged in a certain way. The study of cells is an important link between the study of chemistry and also tissues. The study of tissues is known as your histology. Very good. Histology is the study of tissues. Knowledge of chemistry makes it possible to understand cells because cells are composed of chemicals responsible for many of the characteristics of cells. And then cells in turn determine the form and functions of the tissues of our body. In addition, many diseases and other human disorders have a cellular basis. That is why we need to understand the concepts about cell, because any abnormalities in the normal functions of your cells can mean a disease. That is why you must have a good foundation to understand the basic structures and those functions, those basic lang na parts ng cell. Also, cell has a typical size of about 0.1 millimeters in diameter. Other cells like the human ovum or your egg cell, which is about 1 millimeter in diameter. So it is also variable. It varies among any types of cell. Like your ovum again, the ovum or the human egg cell measures about 1 millimeter in diameter, so medyo malaki. And what are some examples of cells in our body? Cells like your nerve cells, also called as your neurons, by the way. Neurons, although they are microscopic in nature, no, they are also microscopic in terms of their size in diameter. They may be quite long. It is because these type of cells, no, magkakaiba kasi ang itsura ng mga cells. Magkakaiba talaga sila ng size. Example, yung sinasabi ko na neurons, since it is quite long, it is because that this type of cell, neurons, this type of cell has a longer projections, they call this axons, and the smaller projection or appendages, which they call this as your dendrites. So, magkaiba yung kanyang itsura. It is because it varies and it also varies in terms of their size. But the typical size of a cell is about 0.1 millimeters in diameter. And how did they measure the size of the cell? We are thankful that the discovery of the microscope, especially the electron microscope. Don't you ever know that because of the discovery of the microscope, it helped us to understand the estimation of the size of the cell. And especially since bacteria and virus are not of the same size. The virus is much smaller also. The bacteria, in which the electron microscope can also help to magnify the size of the virus. It is the help of the electron microscope. So we're very glad that microscope was discovered. And by the way, the average size, since I mentioned the typical size of the cell, there's other information that the average size of a cell is 1/5 of the size of the smallest dot that you can make on a sheet of paper. Dot, no dot. Try to make a dot in your paper with a sharp pencil. I urge you to make a dot in a sheet of paper, especially with a sharp pencil. In spite of their extremely small size, cells are complex living organism. So napakaliit pala ng size ng cell, even a single dot. Single dot to some people, a single dot can be neglected. You cannot see that, especially if you want to maximize the size. You use the certain types of microscope as I mentioned earlier, if you want to maximize the size of the viral particle, you can use the electron microscope. Cell theory. According to one of the proponents of this theory, Robert Hooke, Robert Hooke was actually a scientist from London, United Kingdom. He said that cells are the building blocks of all plants and animals. When we say building blocks, what is the meaning of building blocks? Building blocks is something essential on which a larger entity is based. So kapag tinanong ka na yung teacher na, ano ba ang building blocks ng proteins? So the answer would be, yes, very good. That is your amino acids. Because hindi nabubuo yung protein molecule kung wala yung mga amino acids. The same thing with plants. If we speak on plants, what make plants as a whole? Because they are made up of plant cells. Same thing with the animal cells. They are made up of animal cells. So according to the proponent, again, Robert Hooke, because of his research, that all cells come from the division of the pre-existing cells. Yung mga cells natin nagdi-divide yan. Dumadami yan. No? Halimbawa na lang yung cell A. Si cell A nag-divide siya. Si cell B nag-divide din siya. So saan nanggaling yung mga cells na yun? Paano ba sila nagdami? Saan ba nanggaling yung mga naipoproduce nila ng mga cells? Siyempre, so nanggaling din yun sa mga katulad nilang mga cells. They came from the pre-existing cells. By the way, yung cells natin, actually, there are two broad categories also of the cells. Kapag isa lang, when they are composed of a single cell, like your bacteria, they are termed or they are known as a unicellular organism. On the other hand, kapag they consist a lot of cells, many cells, they're known to be what? They are multicellular. Again, Unicellular pag isa lang, pag marami, multicellular. Cells are the smallest unit that perform all vital physiological functions. As I said, since it is a small unit, I mentioned a while ago that cell is a basic unit of life. The same thing with what? With the plant cells, animal cells, and as I said, it performs a vital physiological function. So we will recognize each one by one. What are the physiological functions of your cells? So isa sa mga importanteng mga function niya is what? Common is your protection and support. Protection and support. In what way does a cell exhibit protection and support? Kasi yung cells natin, it produces and secretes various molecules and provides protection and support for the body, for our body. Example, cells located in our bone or the bone cells. In other book, they term as your osteocytes. Now, bone cells, since there are cells proliferating in our body, especially in the skeletal system, since, as I said, for protection and support, it is because they secrete various chemicals or molecules that provide protection and support for the body. The bone cells produces mineralized material, as I said. Since when we say mineralized material, what example of this mineralized component? Example, your calcium that helps our bones so hard, so resilient, and this protects what? Vital organs, other vital organs, and also supports also the weight of the body. Other function that is highly physiological is that for movement, the movement of our body occur because of the molecules located within the specific cells, such as your what? Muscle cells. Movement. Third is your communication. Communication is one of the physiological function of your cell. Why? Because cells produce and receives what? Chemical and electrical signals that allow them to communicate with one another, like your neurons or your nerve cells. That is part of your what? What system is that? That is your nervous system. Very good. For example, nerve cells communicate with one another, and don't you ever know that these nerve cells or neurons can also influence other cells? They also communicate with other cells. No? For example, the neurons communicate also with the muscle cells so that the muscle cells can perform its function, that is for movement. So that is one way of communication. And the other one is that cell metabolism and energy release. The chemical reactions that occur within the cells are collectively referred as the cell metabolism. Energy released during the metabolism is used for cell activities such as the synthesis of a new molecule, muscle contraction, heat production, which helps maintain body temperature. And lastly, the other one is that for inheritance. Okay, for inheritance, because each cell contains a copy of the genetic information of our genes of the individual. Specialized cells such as your sperm cells and the oocytes, or the other term is that, or your egg cells, which can transmit genetic information to this generation. So that is inheritance. Again, one of the physiological functions of a cell are protection and support, movement, communication, cell metabolism and energy release, and last one is the inheritance. According to the cell theory made by or proposed by Robert Hooke, he claims that each cell maintains homeostasis at the cellular level. So what is homeostasis? Since we have also discussed this in our modules, homeostasis is a state of balance. It's a state of balance. Other term for this is your what? dynamic equilibrium. Now there's balance. Everything is in balance. So for example, in our body, since our body is made up of cells, for example, the regulation of the temperature. So the temperature maintains its normal range or normal level, because too high can also compromise other organs. No? In medical term, that is what we call your hyperthermia. Too low of the below the average level of the normal body temperature is what we call your hypothermia. Very good, hypothermia. So too low and too high, that is bad for our cells. It can compromise other physiological functions. So that is why cells must maintain what? Homeostasis, or a state of balance. There are general classes of cells. We have your sex cells and your somatic cells. When we say sex cells, these are your germ cells, also known as your reproductive cells. So in male, that is your sperm or your spermatozoa. While the female, that is your, yes, very good, that is your female, that is your oocyte. A cell that develops into an egg. Somatic, by the way, when we say somatic, that is your, when we say soma, that is body. So cells from our body, somatic cells. All body cells except sex cells, that is somatic. Sperm and the oocyte are referred as haploid. Haploid. Bakit sila tinatawag na haploid? I think you are familiar with the term haploid. It is because that they contain a single copy of each chromosome, compared to the usual 2 chromosomes in all other body cells. So that is their difference. Now we will talk about cell structure, or the parts of the cells. Generally, as you can see the image from letter A, there is nucleus, cytoplasm, and plasma membrane. Actually, those are the 3 main regions of the cell. Generally, in a cell, there is 3 main regions. That is your nucleus, that is your cytoplasm, and your plasma membrane. If we will project the inner part, that is your nucleus, there you can have several parts of the nucleus. That is the nuclear envelope, and we have also the chromatin. The inner part, we have also the nucleolus, and we have some several pores there. That is your nuclear pores, and those other molecules or other organelles, such as your rough endoplasmic reticulum. Let us discuss deeply on the cell structure. As you can see, this is the typical structure of the cell. I know some of you are familiar with the several parts of the cells, and some of you are known to memorize, and not to memorize only the parts of cells, but the associated functions of the cell. But in the language of anatomy and physiology, and we are talking also the perspective of cell physiology, we must have to further discuss this and give implications where we are discussing this cell structures. By the way, the studying of parts of the cells can be also dealt on a specific scientific discipline known as your cytology. Since I think that you can identify the parts of cells or the basic structure of the cell, since they are highlighted in colored form, there you can see the nucleus. Nucleus is a certain organelle. By the way, when we say organelle, kapag sinabi nating organelle, ito yung mga it likes or it acts like a little organs. No? They are little organs. At first, I mentioned the nucleus. So nucleus is often located at the center of the cell. Actually, it contains genetic material, specifically that is your DNA, and also the nucleoli. Your nucleolus also is the site of ribosome and messenger RNA synthesis. Since I mentioned a while ago that there are three primary regions of your cell. First, that is your nucleus. Second, that is your cytoplasm. Next is your plasma membrane. Your plasma membrane is also called in some other books, that is what we call your cell membrane. The cytoplasm, actually, it is like a factory area. Since it is like a factory area in analogy, no? Yung sa loob ng cytoplasm, diyan nakikita yung ibang mga organelles din. No? Your cytoplasm is a cellular material that is outside of the nucleus. If you can see the nucleus here, this is in the color violet. Outside of that, this is your cytoplasm. And it is also located inside the plasma membrane. Again, there are three primary regions of your cell, typical cell. That is your nucleus. Second is your cytoplasm, and third is your plasma membrane. So in between of the nucleus and the plasma membrane is your cytoplasm. Actually, your cytoplasm has three major elements. First element of your cytoplasm is your cytosol. Actually, this is a liquid solution. Then mostly they are made up of water. Take for example your Filipino delicacy. I mean, such of the common food is your halo-halo. Your halo-halo, it has several ingredients. We have several ingredients like a banana, other ingredients like your ice, and whatsoever ingredients that are suspended in the that are also suspended in the lower portion. And we know the fact that halo-halo, once the ice melts, it has a composition of water. The more that the halo-halo is being mixed, that is one of the Filipino food, common Filipino food. Now take for example the ingredients, those visible ingredients. They will serve as your organelles, a little tiny organs, and the water there is the cytosol. It is where the ingredients are being suspended. Now, the second major element of your cytoplasm is your organelles. Since I mentioned again the organelles, in a form or in analogy of the Filipino delicacy, the halo-halo. Organelle, since it is a form of or a basic they are basic parts of the cell. They are little organs. Parang mga maliliit na mga organs and that they are suspended in the cytosol, the liquid part of the cytoplasm that are mostly water. It has water component. And third, major elements of your cell is your inclusions. What is these inclusions, by the way? Inclusions, sila yung mga, actually most of them are stored nutrients or cell products such as your lipid droplets. No, yun yung mga inclusions. Okay, again, there are three major elements based on my analogy on the halo-halo. No, the cytosol is the water component, actually the semi-liquid component, and your organelles, these are your what? These are your little organs that are suspended in the cytosol. And lastly, that is your inclusions, which are your stored nutrients. And the third primary region of your cell is your plasma membrane. Where is your plasma membrane? By the way, it is pointed on the right upper corner. Your plasma membrane actually serves as a boundary. It serves as a boundary between the outside and the inside part of the cell. It regulates movement of the substances into and out of the cell. So that is your plasma membrane. And I think there are some important organelles that I need to discuss to you. I will pick up the mitochondrion. Your mitochondrion, by the way, it is like a sausage-shaped organelles. Most of the mitochondrion are located in the muscles and also in the liver. By particular in your muscles. Since your muscles are contracting or it exerts a lot of activities, muscular contraction. When there is muscular contraction, it needs a lot of energy. That energy is in a form of, they are actually abbreviated ATP. What is ATP? That is a form of energy. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is also known that your mitochondrion is called as the powerhouse of the cell. It is really because it provides ATP, a form of energy. Bakit ba tinatawag siyang mitochondrion, by the way? From the word mitos, they are thread-like also. Thread-like structure. And chondros, that contains granules. That is a Greek word from mitos and chondros. Thread plus granules, because most of the inner part of the mitochondrion, there are a lot of chemicals that are also suspended. Next is your peroxisomes. Where is your peroxisome? Your peroxisomes are actually, they are membranous sacs. They contain a powerful enzymes. You know what is enzymes, guys? Your enzymes, by the way, they are chemicals that speeds up chemical reaction. No? It speeds up. Mas pinapadali niya yung rate of chemical reaction. Since these type of organelles, they contain powerful enzymes, as I said, this specific enzyme is called as your oxidase. Oxidase. This enzyme uses molecular oxygen to detoxify a number of harmful or poisonous substances. Example are your alcohol and alcohol into excessive forms, and also poisonous substances such as your formaldehyde. Those are just examples of poisonous or harmful substances. And peroxisomes' most important function is to disarm the dangerous free radicals. So, free radicals. And I think you have known also this so far. You have heard the word free radicals. Now, what is free radicals, by the way? Actually, they are chemicals that can damage the cell. So when we speak about chemical, so I think you have known about atoms or molecules. Since at the molecular level, since we're talking about chemicals, pertaining on the explanation about free radicals, no, they are chemicals na pwede makadamage sila sa mga cells natin, sa mga healthy cells. So paano nangyayari yung mga free radicals? Actually, yung atom, no, yung atom na nakikita din, no, inside and outside of the environment of the cell in the form of chemicals, by the way. Kapag yung atom kasi na hindi stable o hindi pantay yung number of electrons, alam naman natin yung dapat na ang atom mayroon siyang dapat stable yung kanyang mga number of electrons. By the way, electrons carry a negative charges. If you're familiar with octet rule, sinasabi sa octet rule na para maging stable daw ang isang atom, no, dapat meron siyang 8 numbers of electrons. At kung nababawasan, kapag hindi yun 8 numbers yung kanyang electrons, let's say for example 5 lang yung kanyang electrons, example, because of the octet rule, no, siya ay sinasabing unstable siya na klase na atom, no. So ano ang gagawin niya since unstable siya? So hindi siya pantay, kulang siya ng 3 electrons para maging stable siya. So ang nangyayari is that kumukuha siya o nang aagaw siya ng ibang mga electrons doon sa mga atoms na mga stable na. So ang nangyayari is that yung mga stable na sana na mga atoms ay naging unstable din. So malaking mga pagbabago na gaganap sa mga atoms din doon na makikita sa ating cells. Maraming nag-aagawan, and because of that mga agawan na nangyayari sa loob ng ating cells or sa labas ng ating cells, ito ay may potensyal na epekto sa ating cells. Pwedeng ma-damage yung ating cells. It can ruin the cellular activities of our cell. It can compromise the activity of our cell. Because of that, kasi they will achieve a stable number of electrons. Actually, mayroong mga alternative na ginagawa yung ating peroxisome para hindi din ma-damage totally ang ating cells. Ang ginagawa niya doon sa mga free radicals, as I said, free radicals are also chemicals that can damage the cells. And also, as I explained a while ago, that they are also atoms na hindi pantay yung kanilang mga electrons, no? Kaya yung dahilan na nag-aagawan sila ng mga electrons. So, ang ginagawa ng ating peroxisomes is that they will convert the free radicals into hydrogen peroxide, no? So i-convert nila yung free radicals na iyon na nakakasira sa ating cells. They will convert that into an hydrogen peroxide. That is why the name peroxisome, no, peroxide, peroxisome or peroxide bodies. Actually, mayroon ding mga pagkakataon na nakakatulong din para maiwasan yung mga free radicals. In what way ba? Na para maging stable yung mga atom or yung atom na kulang sa number of electrons. In some foods that we eat contains vitamins. There are a lot of vitamins necessary for normal life functioning. some of the vitamins, such as your vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, are also helpful as they give off their extra electron. The molecules that is found in these vitamins, they give off their extra electron, no? Binibigyan nila yung mga atoms na kulang ng number of electrons actually, na para maging stable, para hindi sila makapanira ng ibang cells. Actually, yung peroxisomes, there are also numerous specifically in our liver and in the kidney. Again, there are the liver cells and the kidney cells. So, ganon yung mekanismo ng free radicals. Ano pa ba ang mga importanteng halimbawa ng mga organelles that we need to discuss? Your organelles such as your rough endoplasmic reticulum that is located in the upper part, the upper corner, right upper corner. Your rough endoplasmic reticulum. What is the function of your rough endoplasmic reticulum? Your rough endoplasmic reticulum, as you can see, there are particles, smaller particles that are attached on mga nakadikit na mga molecules. Those actually are ribosomes, no? Yung rough endoplasmic reticulum, masasabi mo siya na rough, it is because there are attached ribosomes, may mga nakadikit na mga ribosomes. Kung ikukumpara mo ito sa smooth endoplasmic reticulum, kung maigi mo itong tingnan, no, wala siya mga ribosome. Yun yung nila, difference in terms of their structures. Now, rough endoplasmic, again, they have a ribosomes attached, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, wala sila mga ribosomes. Okay, what is that ribosomes, by the way? The ribosomes are also needed for protein synthesis. It is also the site of protein synthesis, the actual site of protein synthesis, by the way. It is also the site for the translation of proteins. There are two forms of ribosomes, or types of ribosomes. Actually, first type is those that are attached in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, while the other ribosomes are freely circulating in the cytoplasm. Again, since it is freely circulating into the cytoplasm, they are called free floating ribosomes, or simply, they are free ribosomes. Since it is obviously, it is very obvious that the rough endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum are located in what part of the primary region of the cell? They are located in what part? They are located in the cytoplasm. Again, most of the organelles are suspended in the cytoplasm. Kung titingnan mo sila, para sila mga lumulutang sa liquid portion ng cell, that is your cytoplasm. Specifically, those elements are your cytosol. Okay, yung smooth endoplasmic reticulum, ano naman yung mga smooth endoplasmic reticulum? What is that kind of organelle? Your smooth endoplasmic reticulum, actually, they are also the site for lipid synthesis. What is lipid? No, synthesis is just formation of synthesis. Synthesis is just a formation of lipid. No, that is why lipid synthesis. Lipid is a substance that is not soluble in water, but it is soluble in alcohol, in ether, and formaldehyde. Okay, your lipids Example of lipids are cholesterol and also your fats. Actually, these are mga fatty substances. Actually, your smooth endoplasmic reticulum are most of them are located in our liver. Expect that the liver has a lot of smooth endoplasmic reticulum because it helps detoxify drugs and other poisonous substances such as your pesticides. Your smooth endoplasmic reticulum, as I said, this is a site of lipid synthesis. It is also a site for detoxification processes. And it is suspended in the cytoplasm. Another organelles that we need to discuss is your Golgi apparatus. Actually, the term Golgi, no, it is named after the discoverer of this organelle, this part of the cell. That is Camillo Golgi. The Golgi apparatus. What is the function of your Golgi apparatus? Actually, it modifies protein structure and packages protein. Siya yung nagpa-package ng mga protein, no? In the secretory vesicle, no? Again, sila yung mga nagpa-package ng protein in the secretory vesicle. And most of the Golgi apparatus, again, they are located in the cytoplasm of the cell. Another organelles that we need to discuss is your centrioles. Your centrioles, by the way, this is an organelle that helps organize the microtubules. Tumutulong siya para ma-arrange yung mga microtubules actually. The microtubules actually, it serves as a skeletal system of the cell. No? Imaginein mo yung isang bahay. May mga structures yan siya. Kung wala yung mga haligi na yan, guguho yung bahay. The same thing with your microtubules, serving as very important structures. No, it forms a lot of structures, by the way, your microtubules, that is located actually also in the cytoplasm. It supports the cytoplasm. It also assists in the cell division and forms the component of your cilia and flagella. What is cilia? What is flagella? Most of cells has cilia and most of cells has flagella. By the way, pag sinabi natin cilia, ito yung mga other parts din ng cell that are located in the surface part of the cell. Cilia moves substances over the surfaces of the certain cells. No? Sila yung parang nagwawalis, no? Tagwalis din. Mga other parts lang ito ng mga cells din. This is a typical parts of the cell. Hindi na nasali dito yung parts ng cilia. Yung flagella, ano naman yung mga flagella na iyan? Actually, yung flagella, ito yung nakikita sa mga sperm cells. No? Sa sperm cells, or one of the reproductive type of cells. And, flagella helps propel the sperm cells. Siyempre parang lumalangoy yung ibang cells. No? As you can see, during the fertilization process, the sperm cells has flagella. No? It helps propels the sperm cells. It means to say that is for the motility of the sperm cells. Ano pa ba ang kailangan nating ma-identify na structures? Your As I said, I would like to emphasize again the microtubules. These are your organelles that supports the cytoplasm. It acts like the skeletal system of the cell. I said in analogy of a house na kung walang haligi, guguho yung bahay. At kung wala din itong mga microtubule possible, they will affect the integrity of the cell. No? Mako-compromise din yung mga ibang parts ng cell. Yung intermediate filaments. Ano yung mga intermediate filaments, by the way? What are those intermediate filaments? Intermediate filaments, actually, they help strengthen the cell. They also maintain the shape of the cell and also stabilize the position of the organelles and other related parts of the cells. Those are intermediate filaments. It helps also to form desmosomes. Actually, desmosomes helps attach the neighboring cells together. Yung mga magkalapit na cells, tumutulong itong mga desmosome. As I said, desmosomes, helps attach neighboring cells. Again, your intermediate filaments help to form desmosomes, of which desmosomes helps attach the neighboring cells together. Ano pa ba? Meron tayong isa pang dapat ma-discuss natin, yung lysosome. Ano yung lysosome, by the way? Your lysosome are breakdown bodies. Actually, they are common they're common organelles located in the phagocyte. Actually, phagocyte. Na phagocyte, ibig sabihin yung mga phagocyte. Phago means to eat, no? Actually, they are cells. Actually, cytes mean cells. They are big eaters type of cells. Actually, they are your white, certain type of white blood cells. Tumutulong sila para ma-remove, kainin yung mga cellular debris, mga dead type of bacteria, no? Sila yung mga kumakain, no? Para malimit yung mga ganung klaseng mga foreign agents na nagpe-penetrate sa cellular environment. Actually, your lysosomes, it has also a hydrolytic enzymes, no? Hydrolytic enzymes. Your lysosome, since it contains an enzymes that digest material taken into the cells. When we say hydrolytic enzymes, common example of your hydrolytic enzymes are your amylase, amylase. Actually, some of the hydrolytic enzymes helps to convert certain types of molecules, such as your carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Your carbohydrates, through the means or to the help of these hydrolytic enzymes, can be converted into simple sugars. Your protein can be converted into amino acids, and your fats can be converted into fatty acids and glycerol. Okay? And lastly, there is a chromatin there. What is that chromatin? Actually, your chromatin is a thread-like material composed of RNA and histone proteins, actually. So we know the fact that RNA is a macromolecule, macro, which means big molecules. Macro means, as I said, it is big. So macromolecules as a whole is a big molecules. What is the function of this RNA? By the way, in the central dogma of molecular biology, if you are familiar with this term, actually this terms best describes the flow of the genetic information in the cells. Ibig sabihin nito, dinidescribe niya na yung DNA, that the DNA contains instruction for making a protein which are copied by the RNA, and then RNA uses the instructions to make a protein. Okay, again, from DNA to RNA to protein. Okay, what is the function of this RNA? From the central dogma of molecular biology. Now it states that the DNA contains instruction for making a protein which are copied by the RNA. So that is the function of the RNA. And then RNA, no, the one that uses the instruction to make a certain type of protein. Okay, and in general, since there are lots of parts of the cell, several structural parts are also vital. Why we need to understand them? It is because having a knowledge on the normal physiology of the cell is also important or critical in understanding, example, the field of pharmacology or the field in studying the drugs, because there are drugs that we need to also to understand their mechanism. Example, merong mga drug na itinatarget nila yung DNA synthesis. No? Most of the drugs are penicillin. Example, mga antibiotic yun sila. Example lang yun. No? Those drugs, since they target the synthesis of protein or the formation, the synthesis pala ng DNA. No? Kapag pinigilan nila yung most of the drugs kasi pag pinigilan nila yung DNA synthesis ng isang cells, no, kapag walang DNA, since again that DNA is absolutely necessary for the cell division, so hindi makapag-divide yung cells, and ultimately the cell will die eventually. And because of that, having a knowledge in the normal physiology of the cell is also vital in understanding other diseases that have a cellular basis, such as your cancer. We need to understand also the normal characteristics of cells to be able to understand the mechanisms of disease. In other field of science, that is what we call your pathophysiology. Your pathophysiology talks about the mechanisms of disease. Paano ba nangyayari itong mga diseases na ito? Kapag itong disease has a correlation, has a strong relationship to understanding in the human body cells, the normal physiology, and the normal structures of the cells. So that is the point why we are talking about cell structure as a whole. Not just by memorizing them one by one, but we need to give more implications of dealing the cell structures or every cell parts and functions of a normal health or a healthy normal and healthy cells. Now we will tackle about the normal cell growth. We need to understand how a normal cell undergo a process of cell division. We know the fact that normal cells have regulated cell division. It means to say, when you say regulated, the cell division is controlled. So hindi siya dapat mag-divide na susobra. For example, if today the cells will produce a 10 number of cells, so it must be 10 number of cells, because higher from that would mean the disease, or it can be implicated in diseases that have cellular basis. Example, that is your cancer. That is why it is very important to know the normal cell growth, because there are associated processes here that are always involved. That is your mitosis and your meiosis. When the cell division happens or occurs in all cells in the body except egg and sperm cell, that is your mitosis. Again, I would like to emphasize the mitosis that is happening in all cells in the body. So what are those cells? That is your, very good, that is your somatic cells. On the other hand, we have another type of cell division. We have your meiosis. It primarily occurs only in the reproductive cells. Examples of your reproductive cells, those are your egg and sperm cells. Especially, I think you have known this also so far in the biology class, but in the perspective of anatomy and physiology, specifically in our topic for this day about cell physiology, mitosis has a specific phases. You have your prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and the telophase. Actually, in some other sources, they included also the interphase. Actually, the interphase have specific phases, and later on I will discuss this is one by one. And what is the implication? Why we are discussing these phases? It is because, again, there are some diseases that have a cellular basis, or diseases such as your cancer. I know some of you have heard about cancer. So again, understanding about the normal cells, especially the normal characteristics of how a normal cell undergoes a specific or a certain cell division, is of a paramount importance also to understand diseases that have a cellular basis. Another characteristic of normal cell growth is that normal cells undergo apoptosis, or also known as your programmed cell death. That is why there are important concepts that we must have also to understand about apoptosis. Actually, this is beneficial in the sense that it also helps remove excessive cells. It is because, for example, there are diseases na tinatawag nila na tetra-amelia syndrome. Ito yung sakit na, or a disorder na yung pinanganak na may ganitong sakit, I mean, wala siyang paa, wala siyang kamay, all four limbs are absent. It is because, primarily, during the embryonic period, kung saan nabubuo yung, during the formation of the embryo, it's very important that all cells must divide in a well-regulated fashion, or in a well-regulated manner. That is why, if there are cells, or two cells that are dividing too excessively, this must be controlled through a process of apoptosis. If those cells cannot be controlled, then there are also implications of in other diseases such as may mga organs na sumusobra na napuproduce. That is why if a normal person has a normal 5 fingers, if those cells that are produced during the embryonic period, for example, so expect to notice that upon reaching the adulthood, or upon the baby is born, expect to see that the hands are also excessive. Instead of 5 fingers, it may turn out into 6 fingers. That is why I would like to emphasize that cells must have a regulated cell division. It must have regulated. When we say regulated, it is controlled. It must not too excessive, and hindi pa siya din kukulang, because it has a higher implication to some diseases that has a cellular that have a cellular basis. Another is that normal cells must have a specific morphology. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng morphology? When we say morphology, may sarili siyang appearance, or still a structure. That is why the cells of your nervous system, that is your neurons or the nerve cell, is different from the cells of your liver or the hepatocytes. It is also different from the cells that is located in your skin, the cells located in your gastrointestinal tract, and also the cells located in your heart, the myocardium of your heart. It is because of their specific morphology. Magkakaiba ang kanilang mga itsura actually. No? Just like my example a while ago, that the cells like your neuron, the nerve cells, has a long appendages or projections called as axons, and the smaller projections that is called as your dendrites. So these projection cannot be found in other types of cells. And normal cells are highly differentiated and have specific function. As I said, functions. It has functions. I already discussed the functions of the cell. And when we say differentiated, actually, this is a process na kung saan yung mga immature pa na mga cells, they are undergoing in a process to become more mature. So what are those cells that are highly differentiated that can be also located within the human body? One of example are your stem cells. Your stem cells are also highly differentiated. It also implies when we say highly differentiated, there is a transformation, as I said, from the immature type of cell, they become mature type of cell. Since I give the example about stem cells. Stem cells are located actually inside the bone. Actually, in a specific part of inside the bone is your bone marrow. No, yung bone marrow. In that bone marrow wherein the stem cells are located, most of those cells has a potential to form many kinds of cells. Example, the stem cells located in your bone marrow can become a red blood cells, a white blood cells, and the blood platelets. So most of the origin of these blood cell types came from the cells located in the bone marrow because of the stem cells, the pluripotential stem cells, and with the fact that there are some evidences being laid down that stem cells has the ability also to stimulate other cells that are not well producing at a higher rate of proliferation, such as your neurons. Kasi yung mga neurons natin, kapag namatay yan, wala siyang abilidad na maka-regenerate. So one of the benefits of your stem cells is that to stimulate them, to regenerate. But there are also sources contended that there is a limited sources of your stem cells. Another thing is that a normal cell secrete a fibronectin and stick together with like cells with the tissue. Ano ba itong mga fibronectin na ito? Fibronectin, these are actually the cohesive, the adhesive glycoprotein. It is made up actually of protein. Ano yung importansya ng fibronectin? The fibronectin actually, it will help cells adhere each other. Para siyang glue, no? Sa yung nagsisilbi na para hindi maghiwalay-hiwalay yung mga cells natin. That is why it is very impossible that the cells of your skin can be found in in the cells of your into the nervous system. That is why the cells are adhering each other because of this type of molecule, this type of protein molecule, no, the fibronectin. Kasi siya yung as I said, siya yung nagsisilbi para para yung mga cells, the neighboring cells, they will adhere each other. It serves as a glue na para hindi siya mag-migrate kung saan-saan ng mga areas ng ating body. That is why if the cells of the liver, it must be situated also in the liver, and they should not they have no capacity of migrating to the other areas of our body. It is because of the presence of the fibronectin, a protein type of a molecule, a glycoprotein specifically. And another thing is that a normal cell exhibit contact inhibition. What is this contact inhibition? Actually, if you try to draw in a sheet of paper, if you try to draw a circle in the size of a peso coin, a 5 peso coin, try to draw in your sheet of paper in a size of a 5 peso coin. And inside of that circle, a small circle, fill that with a small circle. If you fill that with a small circle, you can notice that it stops where the small circle occupies its space in a size of a 5 peso coin. So what is then the logic of these circles that are being drawn inside the size of a 5 peso coin? Okay, your cells actually, when they divide, actually nagdi-divide itong mga cells na ito. And when they reach the point that they are touching each other, that is why I let you draw small circles inside this 5 peso coin size. When they reach the point that they are touching each other, that is also the signal that they should have to stop cell division. It will, kapag na-reach ng ganung point na cell division must stop. No? Because if they lose contact inhibition, it means what? It means disease, such as your cancer. Because, cancer cells are cells that have no regulated cell division. Wala silang control mag-divide. No? Wala silang control mag-divide. They dividing without respect of what is the normal cell division, the rate of cell division. They do not follow what is normal cell division. That is why because of that kind of dividing, they divide uncontrollably. Later on, if you try to notice that most of the cancer cells, they form into tumors. It forms like a masses as you palpate that in different areas in our body, because that might be might have a strong correlation or relationship on our basic understanding also with the normal process of cell division. And the other one is that normal cells must have a normal rate of proliferation. Proliferation is the way they will spread each other. It's the way also that they will multiply. No? But when we say normal rate of proliferation, how normal ba na nagdi-divide sila? Okay, depende. Depende sa kung anong uri ng cells. Kasi merong cells na mahina mag-divide, meron din yung masyadong mataas ang kanilang rate of proliferation. Kumbaga, mabilis silang mag-undergo ng cell division. We have mitosis, a cell division occurring in the body cells. Since I mentioned earlier that the rate of proliferation depends on the several type of cells, these cells actually, mabilis silang mag-proliferate. Now, ano mga example nun? Ito yung mga cells na makikita sa lining ng ating GIT or the gastrointestinal tract. No, mga epithelial cells na makikita sa GIT. Examples are your small intestine. Now, the lining of the small intestine has a rapid rate of proliferation. And also, the cells found in the skin, in the hair follicle, and especially the bone marrow. Actually, the bone marrow has two types. There you can see the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow. The red bone marrow, actually, there you can find the cells that I have mentioned earlier, the pluripotential stem cells, which have the capacity to divide in a controlled manner. They can become a red blood cells, they can become a white blood cells, and the blood platelets. And the pluripotential stem cells are very complex types of cells. Cells with absence or slow rate of proliferation. These are actually your cells of the myocardium and also cells found in the cartilage. Kasi sila itong mga cells na mahina or wala talagang kakayahan na makapag-proliferate in the process of cell division. From the word myo, ano ba ibig sabihin ng myocardium? The prefix myo, which means muscle, while the other word cardium, which means heart. So myocardium is a muscular layer of the heart, the muscle layer, the heart. Because heart normally has 3 layers. The outer layer of our heart is termed as your pericardium, while the inner layer is your endocardium, endo which means inner, the inner part, the endocardium. And what I mentioned is the myocardium that is in between of those layers. No? That is the muscular layer. I'd like also to emphasize that there are cells classified according to their ability to divide and produce new cells. One of which is your labile or not fixed cells. Actually, they continue to divide throughout life. Example are your skin cells. There are labile cells also. And also the mucous membranes. The other one are the stable cells. Actually, these stable cells, they don't actively dividing after growth ceases or after the growth stops. But they have still an ability to divide after injury. Example are your connective tissue, glands, liver, and pancreas. Pay particular attention of your liver. There are procedures, surgical procedure. No? For example, yung liver is naoperahan. No? Na may mga procedure kasi na particularly on the organ liver na kapag yan ay nagkaroon ng removal or in a certain part of the liver na medyo may defect or it needs to be removed in a certain part of the liver. After that, since it is not the size after partial removal of the liver changes. After weeks or months, the liver cells are gradually dividing. That is why they are called stable cells, because actually they don't actively divide after growth, but they have still the ability to divide after the injury. Any form of injury on 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 these cells, like your liver cells, if they are injured after a certain circumstances, they have still the ability to divide. And also your pancreas. You know your pancreas. These organs has connection or has a relationship to the production of several hormones like your insulin, and this is highly implicated to the if there are abnormalities in the secretion of your insulin. They are normally implicated to a disease called your diabetes mellitus. Especially your glands. Your glands secretes a lot of hormones, several or certain types of hormones. We have posterior pituitary gland, and we have also anterior pituitary gland for your information. And all of that hormones can be tackled later on if we reach on the different systems such as your endocrine system, because endocrine system involves a lot of discussion on the hormones. Connective tissue, we have a lot of connective tissues. Okay, most of the connective tissues contains a collagenous material or collagen. Another type of cells is your permanent cells. They have little or no ability to divide. Example are your neurons, skeletal muscle cells. Take note that permanent cells can usually recover from little amount of damage. Pay particular attention on your neurons as my example. Once kasi na-damage yung neurons, as I said, they have no capacity to divide. But in some circumstances, and some study, they said that if there are minor injuries sustained in the neurons, because kasi yung neurons natin, may mga three basic part din yun. Yung sa center, yun yung soma na tinatawag sa neuron. And then yung mga longer projections or longer appendages are your axons, while the other one are both dendrites. So for example, under circumstances that there are minor injuries sustained, for example, doon lang medyo sa part ng axon na medyo na-injure lang siya, na-apektuhan, but still the soma, the somatic part, is still intact. I mean, it is still functioning well. So it means to say, they still have the capacity to divide in that rare circumstances. But actually, as I said, that since the neurons are classified to be permanent type of cells, they have no capacity or no ability to divide. But in that study, that is some form of consideration under normal. I mean under rare circumstances. Now let's talk also about the cell cycle. It's very important to note that the cell cycle, part of the cell cycle are also the phases from the cell division, the mitosis. Actually, the cell cycle comprises of different phases. We have the G0 phase, the G1 phase, the S phase, G2 phase, and the mitosis phase. Actually, the G1 phase, S phase, some anatomy books consider them as part of the interphase. Interphase is the preparation stage between the cell division. Okay, what is meant by the G0 phase? Actually, the G0 phase It is the resting or the dormant phase of cells. Most of these cells are cells like your neurons, those cells that has the capacity that have no capacity to divide. And also the G0 phase can occur after the mitosis and during the G1 phase. Again, they can happen or they can occur after mitosis or and during the G1 phase. If you can see the picture on the left corner, you can see there the G0 phase. There you can read indefinite time because as I said, in the cells in the G0 phase, those cells that have no capacity to divide because they still dormant, they still inactive, and we don't know when they do undergo a process of cell division. Take for example, if that cells from the G0 phase, from G0 it will proceed to the G1 phase. Actually, the G1 phase, it is the phase where the RNA and the protein synthesis occurs. So, merong time element ang mga phases na ito. So, sa G1 phase, if you can read, it is 8 or more hours. So, medyo matagal pala. Medyo mataas-taas yung kanyang time element for the cells to undergo a process of cell division. After the G1 phase, a cell can proceed to another phase, the S phase. Actually, the S phase, it takes 6 to 8 hours. That is a time element for the S phase. S phase, actually, it is where the DNA occurs. DNA synthesis occurs. Now we know the fact that the formation or the synthesis of DNA is a very important activity that is happening inside the cells. Next, the cells or a cell may proceed to another phase, that is your G2 phase. The G2 phase is also known as your pre-mitotic phase. Why it is called pre-mitotic? Because after the G2 phase, we have your mitosis phase. The G2 phase, it is also where the DNA synthesis is complete. So it means to say, in S phase, the DNA is not totally complete. The formation of DNA is not totally complete, unlike it is stated in this G2 phase. DNA synthesis is now complete. And also, there is a formation of mitotic spindle. Ano bang purpose ng mitotic spindle? Actually, yung mitotic spindle, they are responsible for the segregation of the chromosomes, actually. Then after G2 phase, which the time element for the G2 phase is about 2 to 5 hours. After the G2 phase, now the cell is ready for the cell division. This cell division, actually your mitosis that is happening in the somatic cells, except those egg cells and your sperm cells or spermatozoa. I know you have known this so far about the phases of the mitosis. You have PMAT, abbreviated as your PMAT. P stands for prophase, M stands for metaphase, A stands for anaphase, and last T is your telophase. So, if you can notice that the cell cycle, since it is a cycle, after mitosis, it starts again G0 phase, followed by G1 phase, S phase, and G2 phase. Actually, what is the importance why we are also discussing this cell cycle? It is because, again, There are some agents that can affect also cells, like your drugs that treat cancers. Don't you ever know that there are drugs that treat cancer affects the S phase? For example, if this drug affects the S phase, so it means to say the DNA synthesis will be affected. So kapag hindi nabuo yung DNA, since the DNA has a a purpose in the cell activity. So it means to say, pag wala ng DNA, wala ng mga activity din in cell, the cell totally will be compromised. And later, the cell will undergo eventually death. So the cell will die. So that is the one of the implication why we are also discussing this cell cycle. Another thing is that for us to be aware that our cell, there is a specific cycle that the cell follows. It is not about the simple cell division that they will undergo automatically mitosis, that they will undergo prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. But there are a series of phases that the cell must follow. Again, that is your G0 phase, the resting of the dormant phase, where our cells are so inactive. Then, second, that is your G1 phase, the RNA and the protein synthesis. And then your S phase, it is where your DNA synthesis happens or occurs. And third is your G2 phase, that is a pre-mitotic phase. It is where the completion of the DNA synthesis. And your mitosis phase, or the mitosis simply, that is the cell division among the somatic or the body cells. Since we have already discussed the parts of the cell, the basic parts of the cell, such as your nucleus, which is said to be the command center of the cell, or the control center of the cell. The nucleus as an organelle has a genetic material, that is your DNA. Each DNA molecule consists of different kinds of genes. Actually, your genes serves to be the functional unit of heredity. In this concept of cell physiology, we will have to broadly classify the genes. Actually, there are three types of genes, since there are in thousands. So the three types of genes first is your proto-oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes, and your DNA repair genes. Let us tackle them one by one. The first type of genes is what we call the proto-oncogenes. Actually, they are normal cell genes that are important regulators of normal cell processes. They promote growth. Actually, they act as a on switch for cellular growth. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng on switch na ito? Actually, when the proto-oncogenes, since this is normal cell genes, they actually tell the cell when to divide. No? Since it is an on switch, it is a genes that will direct the cell to divide properly in a controlled manner. Siya yung magsasabi na, mag-divide ka, magparami ka, in a controlled way lang. Kasi pag hindi na siya controlled, ibig sabihin yun, pwede yun siya mag-lead in other form of diseases. Again, I mentioned the term cancer. Pwede siya mag-lead into cancer cells. Actually, when these genes are altered, when say altered, kapag ito ay nabago in a certain way, no? Or more become active than normal, they may become an oncogene. So, paano nangyari yun? As I said, kapag kasi na damage ang ganitong klaseng gene, itong proto-oncogene, kapag ito ay na-damage caused by several factors such as chemicals, mga chemicals na pwedeng magkakause ng cancer, chemicals such as the nicotine example that are present in the cigarette, no? Those are carcinogenic chemical that may damage the proto-oncogenes. No, kapag damage yung proto-oncogenes, they will be transformed into a bad type of gene that is what we call your oncogene, the cancer-causing gene. It will allow the cells to grow and survive when they should not. There are also factors that will lead to the formation of proto-oncogene into an oncogene, into a bad type of gene. It may be caused by the virus. So when we say virus, as I mentioned earlier, it is in a form of it can be in a form of an RNA or a DNA particle. They are microscopic particle. They are considered as acellular, absence of cells, or non-cellular forms of life. Actually, they can penetrate. They have the ability to penetrate the healthy cells and ultimately damaging the DNA. So again, kung madadamage yung proto-oncogene, transform siya into a bad type of gene. Kasi normally, sabi ko nga, ito yung klaseng gene na magsasabi sa cell na, magparami ka, but in a controlled way. It should be in a controlled type of cell division. That is, I am referring to the mitosis, the division of the body cells. The second broad category of genes are your tumor suppressor genes. What is these genes? By the way, this type of genes actually blocks or suppresses the development of cancer. Actually, tinawag siyang tumor suppressor gene from the word suppressor. It stops the development of cancer. It stops. And actually, it functions to turn off the unneeded cellular proliferation. Kasi yung cells, as I said, normally nagdi-divide sila in a way that they must be controlled. Controlled dapat yung cell division. No? Kasi pag masyadong madami yung naipoproduce ng mga cells due to that kind of cell division, this can lead to a form of diseases such as your cancer. Kung meron tayong tinatawag na like to turn off, for example, pumipigil na, madami na napoproduce, dapat ihinto mo na yan. So, siya yung nagsasabi, si tumor suppressor gene. Unlike doon sa isa, yung si proto-oncogenes, siya yung nagdidikta. It tells the cell na, mag-divide ka, sige, magparami ka, mag-divide ka. So, siya nag-stimulate sa mga cells natin to divide in a controlled manner. So, kapag yung isa, si tumor suppressor gene, siya naman yung magsasabi na, tama na kasi baka susobra ka na eh. So, yun dapat balance lang. Dapat tama lang yung dami ng cells kasi pag sobrang marami na hindi na kasi maagapan yung sobrang dami ng cells, actually, pwede mag-lead yun sa diseases, as I said, like your cancers. Actually, your tumor suppressor gene, It tells the cells when to die in a process called apoptosis. As I mentioned the term apoptosis, that is a programmed cell death. No? Yun yung proseso na magkukumit yung cells, magsi-suicide siya. No, normally, kasi madami na, isa na ako sa mga sobra na mga cells. So, normally, your cells commit a self-suicide in a process of apoptosis, also known as your programmed cell death. So, namamatay sila normally, in a normal way. Kasi, medyo madami na, so kailangan silang bawasan. So, some of them should undergo what? Again, apoptosis or a programmed cell death. Cells with certain alterations in tumor suppressor gene, kapag meron daw mga changes, when say alteration changes in this type of gene, the tumor suppressor gene, may divide in uncontrolled manner. So, yung example ko kanina, katulad din doon sa proto-oncogenes, pag yun naapektuhan yung normal function ni proto-oncogene, siya ay nagiging bad type of gene, siya ay nagiging oncogene, nagkakos na siya ng cancer. So, imbis na yung function niya ay normally, it will tell the cell to divide o magpadami ka, mag-divide ka ngayon. So, ngayon kung damage na si proto-oncogenes, so yung function niya, hindi na ganun yung na nagtitell siya sa kanya. It will tell the cells na mag-divide. So, ang nangyayari is that since it is oncogene, hindi na siya nagpa-follow ng normal rate ng proliferation niya. Kumbaga, mas pinopromote niya na mag-divide ka o bahala ka. Sige, magpagusto ka na magparami ng cells. So, later on, yan, dadami yung cells. It will accumulate. It will make a mass that will lead to a tumor or cancers. So, in this time, the tumor suppressor cells, when it is also damaged, the same thing with your proto-oncogenes, no? It may also divide in the uncontrolled manner. So, sabi ko nga, yung normal cells, it must have a normal or controlled form or manner of cell division. No, yung tinatawag na cell division kanina, yung mitosis. DNA repair genes. Ano ba ibig sabihin itong DNA repair genes? Actually, from the word repair, siya yung mga umaayos, nagre-retaso actually. Na for example, madamage yung mga DNA na nakikita sa ating cells, no, caused by several factors. There's several factors, again, that can damage the DNA in our cells. Maybe those factors are mga microorganisms, viruses, bacteria, other chemicals like chemicals that can cause cancers, mga carcinogenic na mga chemicals. Actually, pag nadadamage yung mga DNA natin sa ating cells, may mga genes talaga na tumutulong para may repair pa sila. Those are your DNA repair genes. Cells with mutations in these genes, they tend to develop additional mutation in other genes. So, delikado pa kung severe pala yung injury na natatamo ng ating DNA. No? Kapag kasi nadadamage yung DNA, naapektuhan itong mga DNA repair genes, wala na siyang kakayahan. Kung medyo malaki na yung damage ng DNA ng ating cells, no, mahirap na din silang i-repair. So, the more damage, the more severe the damage is that the more it is also complicated, no? Magiging complicated to the point na masisira na talaga tuluyan ang ating DNA. And especially, I would like to emphasize that DNA is absolutely necessary for the cell division. Kung walang DNA, wala ding maapektuhan din yung normal cell division. At pwede mamatay yung ating mga healthy cells. So, ganun yun. Now, let's go with the protein synthesis. There are two important processes involved here. We have your transcription, and your translation. If you can see the picture, there are at least five series of events that are happening between your transcription and your translation. Since we have tackled already about the concept of genes and the concept of DNA, when we say genes, again, gene is the sequence of nucleotides making a word, providing a chemical set of instruction for making a specific protein. And you know that each DNA molecule contains many different genes. Since I mentioned a while ago that genes has three types. We have a proto-oncogene, we have a tumor suppressor gene, and also we have the DNA repair gene. You know, genes are also important because they regulate the normal cell division. We have your mitosis and we have your meiosis. So why we're talking about this? Because they are a part to be that we need to understand, especially how proteins are being synthesized. Genes are also the segment of the DNA molecule. As I said, each DNA molecule contains many different types of genes. Since DNA directs the production of proteins in these two steps, to be able to understand this transcription and translation, let me discuss to you about what are these five figures are meant to. Number one, we can see there the DNA strand, the mRNA strand. We have also the nucleus transcription. We have also the tRNA, the amino acid pool. We have the translation, the mRNA strand, and we have also the ribosome, and lastly the protein chain. For the overview of these processes, number one, the DNA contains the information, as I said, necessary to produce proteins. You know the fact that DNA can be located in what primary region? That is located in your nucleus. Next, the transcription of the DNA results in mRNA, which is a copy of the information on the DNA needed to make a protein. Thirdly, the messenger RNA, or abbreviated as mRNA, leaves the nucleus. So how will the mRNA leaves the nucleus? If you can see the another structure that surrounds your nucleus is your nuclear membrane. There are pores there. So that is the way on how the mRNA leaves from the nucleus. Saan ba siya pupunta? Pupunta siya doon sa ribosomes. Okay, by the way, what is the function of this ribosome? As I said earlier, that ribosome is also the site for protein synthesis. Ribosomes can be attached into your rough endoplasmic reticulum. And there are also other types of ribosomes, those that are floating into the cytoplasm of the cell. They are called as your free floating or the free ribosomes. Again, the ribosome is also a site for what protein synthesis, and it is also specifically the site for translation. For the amino acids serves as the building blocks of proteins are carried to the ribosomes by the transfer RNA. Again, by the transfer RNA or the tRNA. Lastly, in the process of translation, the information contained in the mRNA is used to determine the number, the kinds, and the arrangement of the amino acids in the protein. I will give you the analogy to be able also to understand what is transcription and translation. In terms of the analogy, DNA will serve as your reference book that contains many genes. In that book, genes will serve as your recipes for making different proteins. Proteins will serve as your meals. DNA, however, is too large for a molecule to pass through into the nuclear pores to go to the ribosomes. The ribosomes is in your kitchen, where the proteins serving as your meal are prepared. Just like the reference book that stays in the library, DNA remains in the nucleus through the transcription process. Therefore, the cell makes a copy of the information in the DNA. That is why when we borrow books in the library, we cannot take this at home. Instead, some of our method is that we'll make another photocopy of the original content of the book. The same thing with your DNA, since there is an original information that is contained in that molecule. The DNA, since it is necessary to make a particular protein, there must be a need to copy those information present in this DNA molecule. The copy, which is called, that is your messenger RNA, that is your mRNA. In this process, this messenger RNA, as I said, will travel to from the nucleus, lalabas siya from the nucleus. Saan siya pupunta? Ito the ribosome. Saan nakikita ang ribosomes? Your free ribosomes sa cytoplasm of the cell. So the mRNA, since it travels from the nucleus to the cytoplasm to meet the ribosomes, where the information in the copy is used to construct a protein. Of course, the actual ingredients are needed to turn a recipe meal. The ingredients, by the way, are necessary to synthesize or make protein, that is your amino acid. As I said, what is the building blocks of proteins? These are all your amino acids. Kasi hindi nabubuo ang protein kung walang mga amino acids. There are also specialized molecules called your transfer RNA. These tRNA will carry the amino acids also to the ribosome. So in summary, the synthesis of proteins really involves transcription, making a copy of the part of the information from the DNA, because in the DNA, there is a certain information there that is expressed as your gene. And also the translation, that is about converting that copied information into a protein. Again, translation is the converting of the specific copied information into a protein. Since, as I said, protein plays a vital role, especially on the surface of the parts of the cell or the organelles serving as your lethal organs. And during cell division, since protein plays an important role, it helps also during the normal metabolic processes. So there are a lot of functions actually of our protein. If we will analyze that, especially in the muscle cells, where muscles needs a lot of protein, especially when muscle cells are exerting a lot of activity, a cellular activity. And again, protein is almost present in each of those organelles involved, as I discussed earlier, the several components of your or parts of your cells. So that is the overview or the sequence of events that is happening on how protein is being synthesized. Okay, thank you everyone. I hope you have learned a lot in this topic, cell physiology. For any questions or for any clarifications, please feel free to ask.